Have you ever just stopped and wondered, why do we have so many rules? I mean, governments, laws, police, why do we need all of it? Well, way back in the 17th century, a philosopher named Thomas Hobbes thought about this constantly, and his answers, well, they were pretty intense. Today, we're going to dive right into his huge ideas. Okay, let's start with a little thought experiment. Just picture it, a world with absolutely zero rules, no one telling you what to do, total freedom. Sounds kind of awesome, right? But what happens when everybody has that same exact freedom? Hobbes thought about this, and let's just say his conclusion was not good. So Hobbes actually had a name for this chaotic, rule-free world. He called it the state of nature. And for him, this was no paradise. It was the terrifying starting point for all of humanity. Now, to really get where he's coming from, you have to understand what he went through. Hobbes lived during a really brutal civil war in England, a time when society was just completely falling apart. Seeing all that violence and chaos up close made him obsessed with one single question. How do we create a society that's actually peaceful and safe? So he came up with this idea of the state of nature. Now, this isn't necessarily a real historical period. It's more of a what-if scenario. It's what life would look like if you just stripped away every single law, every bit of government, and all authority, leaving people to act purely on their own gut instincts. And Hobbes did not mince words about what that would be like. In probably his most famous quote ever, he said life in this state would be solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Basically, a constant, miserable struggle just to stay alive. So, why was he so pessimistic? What was it about people, in his view, that would turn a world with no rules into an absolute nightmare? Well, Hobbes believed it all came down to a few basic facts. First, he thought people are naturally competitive. We always want more. Second, there's not enough stuff to go around for everyone, limited resources, so people automatically become enemies. In this state, there's no right or wrong, so you basically have a right to do anything to survive, even if that means stealing from or hurting someone else. And all of this creates a world with zero trust and a constant fear of being attacked. And here's the crucial part. Nobody is ever truly safe. You could be the strongest person around, but Hobbes pointed out that even the weakest person can take you down through trickery or by teaming up with others. This fundamental equality in our ability to harm each other means no one can ever relax. You're always insecure. Since this state of nature was so completely awful, Hobbes argued that any rational person would do pretty much anything to escape it. He believed they'd eventually come together to make a deal, a clever agreement to create a safer way to live. And he called this deal the social contract. The core idea is basically a big trade-off. People voluntarily agree to give up their total, wild freedom, the freedom to do whatever they want, whenever they want, and in exchange, they get safety, security, and order, which are all provided by a government they all agree to obey. So how does it work? It's kind of like a three-step process. First, everyone in a group agrees to lay down their weapons, so to speak, to give up their right to just take what they want. Second, they hand over all that individual power to one single central authority. And third, that new authority uses all that combined power to enforce rules and protect everyone from each other. And just like that, you have a peaceful society. Now, Hobbes had a very cool and honestly kind of scary name for this new super powerful government that the people created. He called it the Leviathan. Yeah, the Leviathan was this giant mythical sea monster from legends, and Hobbes chose that name for a very specific reason. He believed the government had to be so massive, so powerful, and so awe-inspiring that nobody would even dream of challenging it. Its power comes from everyone combining their own strength into one single entity, creating this unstoppable force for order. The ruler of the Leviathan is called the sovereign, and for Hobbes, the sovereign's power had to be absolute, total. It couldn't be divided up or questioned because any crack in that authority, any weakness, could send society sliding right back into that chaotic state of nature. The sovereign literally gets to decide what's right and what's wrong. So let's look at the fine print on this deal. It's a really stark trade-off. The sovereign has total power. It makes all the laws, it can't be overthrown, it even controls religion to keep people from fighting. And in return, the people have a pretty simple job. Obey the laws, don't rebel, and support the state.
For Hobbes, this wasn't a bad deal at all. It was the only deal that guaranteed peace.
Now, even though these ideas are from the 1600s, they are still incredibly relevant today. They force us to ask some really tough questions about that balance between freedom and safety. And, not surprisingly, Hobbes has had a ton of critics over the centuries.
People have been pushing back on his ideas for a long time. Some argue that his view of human nature is just way too negative and dark, that people can be kind and cooperate without a terrifying ruler breathing down their necks. Others point to the most obvious danger. Giving one person or group absolute power is basically a recipe for tyranny. And a huge criticism is that people have certain basic rights that no government should ever be able to take away. But here's the thing. Even with all those criticisms, Hobbes's core idea of a social contract is still fundamental to how we think about society. The basic concept that we give up some of our freedoms, like, the freedom to drive 100 miles per hour through a school zone, in exchange for the safety and order that laws give us, well, that's a deal most of us make every single day without even thinking about it.
And that leaves us with the big, final question that Hobbes's work forces every one of us to think about. It's always a trade-off, right? Total freedom versus total safety. So where do you draw the line? How much of your own personal freedom would you be willing to give up to be guaranteed that you're safe?